Welcome to Bloom and Ruin. It is time to begin. Connections by Liam McKay.
Hands reaching from the inside out, seeking warmth for the brambled heart. Seeking warmth to pierce the cold, cold outer veil like a dart. Decayed away by a force of careless malcontent, the mindless disease, seeking nothing, wanting nothing, bringing its host to their knees. The hands hold fast, tightening around the warmth with vice-like grip, but the mindless disease eats them away, severing the connection with a thoughtless snip. The warmth inside the brambled heart is untouched, unseen, unknown. The mindless disease cares not, its sheer apathy through its decaying touch is shown. The host's own warmth tides them over, their cool vessel is not empty. However, still, they reach out with their hands at the warmth, consumed by a tragic sort of envy. Longing permeates the host's own brambled heart, though with the mindless disease they remain opposed. Acceptance also lives within the host's own brambled heart. Perhaps all is well, it's supposed. But the mindless disease's decay is not all-powerful, it can be resisted. Sometimes the hands stay strong, allowing the host warmth they did not know existed. Sometimes the hands find a warmth so immense it extends through the host's being. This absolute warmth and compassion burning through the cold of the brambled heart, a heat so freeing. And so the host keeps reaching for warmth as the mindless disease runs rampant through the brambled heart, trapped forever in this cycle. Small victories won but never the battle, separate beings but never apart. One day the host may finally defeat the devil within, but for now each victory is a step closer to that final, ultimate win.
Wildfire by Analise, Vander, Vinne.
You'd be surprised by how much people portray without words, especially when their faces are obscured by glittering masks. Standing at the back of the ballroom, I scan the crowd, noting the couples who stand closer together, bodies seeming to intertwine. I spot those who are straight-backed, stiff, chins tilted as believing they're above such parties. Then you have those who believe they are the party, shouting to everyone they pass and drinking constantly. I smirk. At least they will sleep soundly. Yet in the sea of jewels, my attention is fixed on the most precious. The crown princess wanders around, ruby dress flattering her fairer features and full curves. A jeweled mask leaves only her eyes and mouth exposed. At the high table, the king converses with lords and ladies, all the while keeping one eye on the ball. "This is crazy," Astra murmurs from beside me, her midnight gown flattering her slim figure, falling straight to her ankles, jewels glittering at the shoulders and stomach. Auburn curls are swept into a half-up, half-down style that's both practical and beautiful. Cosmetics dust her lightly tanned skin, accentuating her high cheekbones and bringing out the sapphire of her eyes. "It is," I whisper back, having to stop my gaze from lingering too long on her body. "She's competition," I remind myself. "What are you two lovebirds whispering about?" A dark-haired beauty glides over and saddles up next to Astrid, golden dress shimmering under the chandeliers, offsetting her charcoal skin and midnight eyes. The usual, I drawl, whisperings of love and desire, things you'd rather not know. Cecilia rolls her eyes, and I'm satisfied when Astrid's mask doesn't quite hide the blush that creeps onto her cheeks. "What do you think the final challenge is going to be?" Astrid questions, avoiding my gaze. Cecilia shrugs. "No idea, but something tells me it's not going to be pretty." Astrid's shoulders tense, and I have half a mind to wrap her in my arms and comfort her. She's strong. She's a skilled killer. Don't underestimate her. Yet, my body has other ideas. Honestly, Cecilia continues, I don't know why the king bothered with this kind of event. I mean, it seems a little over the top. Oh, my father is never over the top, Skylar answers, joining our trio. The princess's lips curve in a smirk. You should enjoy the festival. After all, it might be the last you see. Cecilia glowers at the princess. You would know. Skylar shrugs, clearly delighting in holding more information than us. Her eyes find mine, grin widening. Care to dance? I hesitate, but knowing to refuse could be more trouble than it's worth, I accept. I'm not much of a dancer. Skylar laughs. You'll be fine. I take her hand and join the others on the dance floor. Thankfully, years of practicing stealth and hours watching Astrid dance has made me light on my toes and quick to pick up steps. And you said you couldn't dance. I humour her with a smile. Beginner's luck. Maybe. What do you mean when you said this might be our last chance to enjoy the festivities? What do you think I mean? I'm not entirely sure I want to know the answer. Fear and excitement tangling in my gut. Keep your wits about you, Skylar whispers, leaning close, lips brushing against my cheek. And don't trust anyone. She steps away as the music ends. Good luck. She slips away into the crowd, and I rejoin Astrid and Cecilia by the food tables. Both girls are in deep conversation, and Astrid's lips tighten as I approach. I pretend not to notice, try to ignore the flicker of guilt suspecting what she thought. Don't trust anyone. The king stands and silence settles over the ballroom. Good evening, and welcome to all. Tonight we are delighted to be joined by the Scarlet Guild's finest assassins. They are upon the eve of their final assessment and shall be demonstrating their talents before you this evening. There are 6 finalists. Each will compete against the other in combat. The winners of each round will advance into the next level. The winner will become my champion, an assassin for the crown. Princess Skylar shall announce the competitors. I told you something didn't sit right, Cecilia murmurs. First up, Cecilia and Tamara. A blonde-haired girl who's a good few heads taller than my friend grins as she steps forward. You may each choose a weapon. Skylar gestures to a rack that's being wheeled into the room, adorned with an assortment of weapons from swords and daggers to long sticks and maces. Astrid squeezes Cecilia's hand gently. Good luck. Cecilia nods before selecting a long sword from the rack and stepping opposite Tamara, who twirls 2 curved knives in her palms, bloodlust in her eyes. The onlookers have formed a large circle around the room, giving the 2 assassins space. The duel is won when one of you is knocked unconscious or is killed. There are no rules apart from not being permitted to leave the room. Skylar smells lethal as she adds, Commence. Tamara strikes first, swinging high and then low. Cecilia brings her sword up to meet the first blade, leaping out of the way as the second swipes at her knees. Yet the long dress causes her to be off balance as she parries with a return thrust to the assassin's chest. Tamara sidesteps it easily, a whirlwind of darkness in an obsidian gown, blade glinting in the light. They should have told us we'd be fighting, Astrid murmurs. The guards have an advantage wearing pants. Sounds like someone's nervous. Aren't you? Oh, of course not. I suppose the princess has given you a special pardoning. Jealous? But competition, Malik. Nothing more. Despite the words, her tone suggests she's trying to convince herself of the matter. Both girls are fighting like snakes, and Astrid gasps as Cecilia sends Tamara's blade clattering across the floor. The assassin curses colourfully as she nearly trips on her dress again, using Tamara's retrieval of her weapon as a chance to slice the dress to her knees, kicking off her heels. Astrid glances down at her own dress, and I wonder if she's contemplating doing the same. Remind me why you came here again? You know my story, Malik. You know how bad my memory is. Astrid sighs heavily, and I half expect her not to continue, but she says, I was an orphan. I never knew my parents. I grew up in the back streets of Austrash, never knowing what was coming. When I was about 10, I was caught in a street fight. I was outnumbered and certain I was going to die when Horace found me and fought off the boys. He took me under his wing and made me his apprentice, said I was a fighter, and had the blood for it. He gave me the option of studying and training as an assassin, or be sent to a brothel. Of course I chose the former. It wasn't until a couple of years later that I learned it was the king who was responsible for the death of my family. Becoming his crown assassin is the best chance I have to killing him. Astrid's eyes find mine, and despite the fight that's going on, despite the fact that tonight could be my last, I find myself being lost in her gaze, soaking up the wildfire that flickers beneath the surface. When you fight, remember that. Remember why you're doing this. A shout echoes across the hall, and my breath catches as Cecilia shoves Tamara to the floor, the girl frantically reaching for the knives, lying about a metre from her. Blood drips from Cecilia's nose and mouth as she drives her blade down, angling it towards Tamara's heart, stopping a hair's breadth from her chest. The audience applauds and I exhale, knowing this is far from over. Skylar stands, Cecilia proceeds to the next round. Tamara, you are eliminated from the competition. The blonde clambers to her feet, anger and shame flashing her cheeks scarlet. Cecilia wipes her face on the back of her hand, smearing blood as she returns her sword, and steps to the side of the room. Next, Curtis and Malik are on my shoulders and neck, not bothering with the goodbye to Astrid, not wanting to make it harder than it already is. My competitor is a lanky lad, a few years shy of 20, with a messy mop of chestnut curls and a nose that appears to have been broken more than once. A selected broadsword stepping into a fighting stance, as Curtis does the same. Despite his young age, the kid is a demon with a blade, Scally bailing having called start when he's barreling towards me, sword flashing. Yet having spent months training with him, I know that he favours his right leg, after leaving his left side exposed. This time is no different, and I drive my blade into his ribs. The boy gasps, winded, bouncing back. I advance, strike, thrust, parry. The steps become a dance, and as I hone in my target, the crowd disappears around me. Sweat drips from Curtis's brow, and his eyes narrow into slits as he frantically fights. His technique has improved, but I know his skills lie in poisons more than combat. Minutes pass, and I wind up winning, shoving a brutal kick to his abdomen, finishing with a knockout blow to his head with the hilt of the blade as he crumples to the floor. Applause echoes in my ears as I walk away, discarding the sword, standing beside Cecilia. Astrid is called next, selecting a rapier. She removes her mask and slices her dress to just above the knees, kicking off her heels, rolling her shoulders as she faces her opponent. A giant of a man, Pedro towers over her. Broad-chested and bulging muscles, he swings his mace, a grin promising death on his flabby lips. Ready to dance, little bird? Astrid smiles, allowing some of the wildfire to dance in her eyes. Are you? Pedro doesn't give Astrid a chance to breathe, closing the distance between them in a matter of strides. Astrid ducks as the mace sails over her head, darting forward, blade nicking Pedro's side, drawing blood. Keeping low, she sidesteps, appearing behind him, poking his back. Pedro roars, giving chase. A tendril of smoke, she slips and weaves around him, goading him, keeping just out of range. But Pedro's size has its advantages. He soon realizes Astrid's tactic and stops chasing, putting her on the attack. Astrid has to get closer to hit him, coming within deadly range of the mace. It slices through the air and catches her on the thigh. She jabs through his throat. Blood flows, and Astrid's cry of pain tears at my heart. Just a person. Competition. Rival. The wound slows Astrid down as her favouring her left leg. She's tiring, strikes weaker, and she barely misses another 2 blows that would have ended her. Cecilia curses under her breath, and as Astrid stumbles, shoved to the ground, I instinctively step forward, ready to tear Pedro apart. Breathe. Not your fight. Astrid's gasping, sprawled on the floor. Pedro laughs, stepping closer, stamping on her fingers. Astrid cries out, releasing her sword, which Pedro sends scattering across the tiles. Confidence making him arrogant, he spins his mace high above his head. Astrid aims a brutal kick to his knee, causing the joint to buckle. Pedro staggers, and quick as lightning, Astrid lunges, driving her sword into his chest. The big man topples backwards, slamming onto the floor with a deafening thud. Astrid staggers away, coated in blood, chest heaving. Stunned silence precedes applause, and I realize that my 2 friends are in the final. Astrid seems to realize this too, for the colour drains from her face as she joins us. Pedro's body has removed the tiles, and I wonder how Astrid's coping. She's a skilled actress, yet her eyes are doused with pain and something almost like regret. The final round will consist all 3 of you. Each person is for themselves, and same rules apply, Skylar announces. 5-minute rest, and the competition resumes. The orchestra strikes up a far too merry tune, and Astrid sags onto the floor, legs finally giving way beneath her. Cecilia is immediately by her side, ordering some stranger to fetch a bandage. I kneel next to them, forcing limbs to move even as my head reels, knowing that we might not walk out of here alive. I'm okay, Astrid remarks, and Cecilia shoots her a glare. Kiss my ass, you are. You fought well, I tell Astrid. You too. The 5 minutes is far too short, and we're called to the fight. Cecilia helps Astrid to her feet, the young assassin wincing as she puts pressure on her injured leg. You can surrender, Cecilia whispers. There's no shame in doing so. Astrid shakes her head, that wildfire returning. I can do this. Cecilia doesn't press further, stalking over to the rack, this time choosing the double knife. Astrid and I retain our swords. Begin, Skylar shouts. The 3 of us remain rooted to the spot. Astrid's face is ghostly white, and the hasty bandage Cecilia wrapped around her thigh has soaked through with blood. Cecilia notices too, and we all know that Astrid is the easiest target. But whoever said assassins are without honour can go and piss themselves. Cecilia strikes me first, and despite this being the final challenge, with Astrid and I obstacles in her path to champion, she gives our friend a chance to fight. Astrid attacks Cecilia from behind, but her blow is weak, and Cecilia blocks it, slicing for my head. I duck, swipe low, and shove her away, attention on Astrid. I ignore the ache in my heart, the part of me that loves her, and fight. Astrid matches me blow for blow, pushing against the pain. Cecilia joins her and the two girls attack and sink, but I'm taller and have more muscle, and both are injured. I ram a kick into Cecilia's stomach, sending her staggering backwards. I then follow up with a downward strike. Cecilia screams as my blade slices her arm, cutting to the bone. I go in for another blow, but my sword clashes with Astrid's. She steps in front of Cecilia, and there's nothing of the girl I've come to trust, to love, in her eyes. Only a death stare that chills my bones. Don't trust anyone. Astrid is a whirlwind of fire and darkness, some renewed strength giving her power. Blood wells as her blade nicks my forearm. As brutal as it is, I slice at her injured leg. Astrid gasps, knees buckling, and I follow it with a kick to the ribs. The next blow sends her sword flying. Yet this girl didn't make it to the top of the ladder without hard work and skill. Astrid doesn't back down. She brings her fists up to her face, and I discard my sword, matching her stance. Astrid moves first. Jab, cross, hook. I slam another kick to her side as she moves out of the way, sucking in air. I follow it with a double punch to the head. Astrid cops the first, but dodges the second, sidestepping and ramming a kick into my groin, blood trickling from her lips. I crumple, cursing colourfully, eyes watering. Astrid tries to kick to my ribs and I gasp, yet I don't go down without a fight. I grab her leg, pulling her down next to me, wrapping my arms around her waist. Astrid jams her elbow into my ribs and uses the slight slacking of my grip to scramble out of the way. I catch her, pinning her to the floor beneath me, straddling her. Astrid squirms but isn't strong enough to dislodge me. My hands find her throat and squeeze. Competition. Rival. Enemy. Astrid claws at my fingers, fear dousing some of the wildfire. I press hard and she stops struggling, knowing it's futile. I lean forward, my chest directly over hers, the pounding of our hearts matching beat for beat. Astrid's right hand drops to her side, and her eyes betray her fear. I'm sorry, I whisper, blinking back tears. Competition. Rival. Enemy. Friend. Lover. There's a prick of pain in my side that grows, burning hotter, and I cry out. My hands release Astrid's throat, the assassin gulping down a huge breath as she shoves one of Cecilia's knives into my side. I'm sorry, Astrid croaks, but you are right. I have far too much to fight for. Black spots dance in my vision and I fight to remain conscious, the room spinning, Astrid's sapphire eyes holding mine, Skylar's words echoing in my head. Don't trust anyone. Astrid kneels beside me, her lips brushing mine, and for a brief moment I taste the wildfire on her lips, feel it spark in my veins before darkness swoops in, dousing it all to ashes.
The Long Haze by Josh Morgan.
Morning sun sends streaks of light down to us, brightens the dry, wintry landscape. I'm standing under an evergreen pine tree, looking out onto Montana's roadhouse. Beside me, David leans against the nearby fence, small circles of smoke emanating into the air as he fails to relight his cigarette. Almost got it, he mumbles. Then the flame finally flickers, relights the end of the cigarette. We are waiting for the girls to leave Montana's and join us back toward the car, which is parked only a short distance away. The wind rapidly increases around us, rattles the pine trees above. I start to pace back and forth, my phone in my hand, my thoughts racing. I look to the phone, a surge racing through my body, the realization that I must make the phone call. I need to. I watch as the girls, Talia and Bridget, step out of Montana's saloon doors, pass under the dusted brown sign, and move toward us. I notice the tacky western stars dotted across the sign. The words "Drifters Welcome" etched below in faint white chalk. We'd been driving since about 6 a.m, moving down long, empty vistas of road, David's Ford Ranger pummeled by the on-off again rainfall. The four of us had left Queen's University the previous Sunday, driving down to Belleville, then spending a few nights in Toronto, where Bridget wanted to check out the EDM clubs, and Talia a performance at the Globe Theatre. My only strong takeaway of Toronto was that looking at the much-buzzed CN Tower would make a great antidote for insomniacs. After 3 nights there, we left, passing through Mississauga, then Guelph, and now we were somewhere around Hamilton, having stopped at Montana's for a meal and drink, now en route to Niagara Falls. The sunlight nearly blinds the girls as they reach us. They put on their sunglasses and I zip up my puffer jacket, still trying to mentally hype myself to dial the number. "About time," David says to the girls, throwing his cigarette out and moving off toward the direction of the car. Bridget runs up to be beside him and then asks him how much he knows about the plight of the black beetle. "I don't know, Bridget. Not much, I guess," David tells her, blank-faced. Then he starts to grimace, probably realizes that she has found her new cause of the month. Talia moves by me, holding an old Joan Didion paperback firmly in her hands and looking off, somewhere into the distance. I just stay where I am, under the evergreen pine tree. I hold up my phone and gesture it to the group, the wind starting to calm a bit. "Hey, so I gotta make a quick phone call. I'll meet you guys at the car," I tell them in a hurried and frantic kind of way. "Yeah, no problems, man," David says, relaxed and nonchalant. "Whatever." Bridget chuffs. She rolls her eyes, turns back to David, and continues her spiel about the plight of the black beetle. Talia halts, looks back to me with an exaggerated, light-hearted expression. "Great, so you're leaving me to third wheel now?" she says, almost starts to smile, though she quickly stops herself. "I'll be like 10 minutes, I say, shrugging. "That's a long time to third wheel for," she says glumly as she gestures the middle finger and turns off to follow David and Bridget back to the car, falling from my view. I open my phone and scroll through the contacts, searching for her name, Roelle. Finding it, I dial the number and wait, eagerly, hopefully. Inside Montana's, through the window, I can see the bartender playing cards by himself. An old guy and a youngish girl, 20-something, down morning shots of tequila together. A tattooed guy puts coins into an old jukebox. The call ends. She doesn't pick up, so I quickly redial. Up ahead, I spot a dark car edge into a quiet blue fuel station, halting by the pumps. I notice its strange, perplexing shape, kind of rectangular, its windows tinted. I see nothing inside of it. It kind of resembles a hearse, something that might move among us, transporting bodies to cemeteries. I listen to the sound of the line ring. A gust of wind smacks onto my face, and I imagine my friends waiting by the car for me, glum and annoyed. I look back at the strange car, realize that this whole time, no driver has gotten out to fuel up, not to grab cigarettes or something to eat, nor has any passenger. Instead, it just sits there, agonizingly still, zero movement. Perhaps if I was closer and not looking in from afar, then this might all make sense, might have some kind of reasonable explanation. I don't really know. Maybe this is just my mind taking a situation and searching for crooked edges. The line ends. She doesn't pick up again. I put my phone away and walk back to my friends, plagued by a sense of sharp, violent dread, by immense force that seems to weigh my entire body down, gives me the eerie sensation that I am spiraling. I hear an engine start, see the hearse-like car mount past the fuel pumps and edge back out of the station. The station employee rushes outside, a confused, almost frightened look sprawled on his face. Like a dark blur, the car speeds off down the road, away from my view. I find my friends at the long street light we parked at and hop inside the car, joining Talia and Bridget. David stands just outside, enjoying another smoke in the rain. Talia looks at me, curious, concerned. "Nick," she says, "is everything all right?" I nod, feign a smile. "Of course, why wouldn't it be?" I say this weakly, inauthentically. David throws his cigarette onto the ground, steps on it. He gets inside the car, starts the engine, and we move back onto the drizzled roads. Everything we pass is drenched in thick rain and reflected in faint, dewy sunlight. A couple of other cars pass alongside us, but the road is mostly quiet, almost empty, almost ghost-like. Talia opens up Spotify and puts on Crime Wave by Crystal Castles. How long now? Bridget asks. I think, David starts to reply, haltingly. 20 minutes, Talia says, her voice firm and fast. Right, David says, about 20 minutes. Bridget leans into the front of the car, snaps a photo of us all. I sit there in the front seat, take a sip of the coffee, and slowly fall into the subdued, frenetic trance of the Crystal Castles song as it leaps out of the car and sets across the rainy exterior, the thin brown roads, the antique motels, the murky lakes. David taps along to the steering wheel, moves to the song. I turn around and look to Talia, who gently smiles. I turn back, taste the heat of the coffee, and look outside again. Watch as the rainy landscape starts to drift outwards. Washes of green and brown, merging, forming, fading. We stop at a war memorial near St. Catherine's. It sits on long, spacious land, damp green grass that appears endless. The drizzle calms and we walk over, but find there's nobody else around. No visitors, no employees even. We pass some statues, an empty cafe, and a small cannon that Talia snaps a picture of. I can't say for certain, but as we wander around the place, I think we all become confused, gripped by this shared feeling of emptiness, because we look to each other cautiously, no one saying a word, no one daring to vocalize this strange haunting feeling. David, Talia, and Bridget walk back to the car. I trail behind them, but stop as I pass a large stone banner. Written on it are the names of deceased Canadian soldiers and the dates of their demises. I start to fixate on the names, become lost in the heavy, bronze-coloured font. I imagine these names leaping off of the stone, taking a form of their own, and moving through the volumes of empty space. I walk back to the car, and we hit the road again. Retrograde by James Blake is now playing, and we roll down quiet stretches of road, the car edging beside fenced-off farmlands. Bridget is again explaining why we should all care more about the plight of the black beetle. We all kind of groan, but laugh too. I take another sip of the coffee, ease into the quiet atmosphere, the peacefulness of the road. But then Talia screams. The peacefulness is shattered and split apart. She's panicked, trying to speak, but failing, pointing to something outside of the car. What? Talia, what is it? I say, turning to the back seat. Oh my fucking god, she finally utters, fear dripping in her voice. What? David barks, slowing the car. What the fuck is it? I follow her gaze behind the car and see a body resting on the ground beside the road. Holy shit, I say. David, turn around. There's a body back there. Turn around. David makes a swift U-turn, then slowly drives toward the body. I feel a jolt of panic hit me. We all do. David, usually calm and confident, appears weaker, more fragile. He pulls the car up toward the spot of fenced land. None of us move. Well, I'm not going alone, David says, piercing the silence. I notice that everyone is now looking at me. Fuck, fine, I say, joining David out the car. We leave the girls inside and slowly, cautiously walk toward the side of the road. I see the large, overweight figure of a man. He wears a bright yellow sweater, faded blue jeans. His head is perched back across damp leaves. David and I look to each other, but say nothing, the fear rising as we approach. I bend down and try to examine the possible murder victim. I feel immense sadness, colossal shock. But then, the body bursts up, heaves for air. The fuck? David shouts, jumping back. I just freeze. The large figure stands up now, almost casually, without fuss.
Hey, my name's Terry. Could I hitch a ride to Port Colborne?
David and I just stand in utter shock and complete confusion. What the fuck? I say, looking at David, then back to this Terry. What the fuck is happening? David says.
Please.
Terry says annoyingly, without a shred of irony. Port Colborne? We're not even going in that direction. We're going to Niagara Falls, David says. We stopped, I say, because we saw you lying there on the side of the road, completely motionless. I glare warily at Terry, trying to understand what it is that is happening. We stopped, I reiterate, because we thought you were dead. Terry just shrugs.
Oh, me? I'm fine, lads.
Well, why were you laying there on the side of the road like you were dead? David asks.
Ah, well, I was pretending to be dead because it's far easier to get people to stop that way. Far easier than hitchhiking, you know?
No, I don't know, I bark back, unamused. You're a goddamn fucking wacko, you know that? Oh my god, David mutters, walking back to the car. I follow him, both of us annoyed, both of us weirded out.
Well, you did stop, didn't you?
Terry calls back to us, flailing his arms up in the air, as if we are the unreasonable ones in this bizarre situation. Fuck you, man, I shout back to him, returning to the front seat of the Ford Ranger.
Yeah, alright, no need to be a dick.
Terry calls out, as he lays back onto the wet ground, returns to his bizarre, playing dead hitchhiker ploy. What the fuck was that about? Talia asks us as we re-enter the car. Nothing, just some weirdo. Let's just forget about it, I say. Agreed, says David, shaking his head, starting up the engine. We pass large steel bridges, little factories with smoke ringing out, some more lakes, greenish but tiny. Bridget is leafing through a travel brochure, mentions something about an ice wine festival later that night. Talia is reading her Joan Didion novel. Then David starts retelling that story about his swim team's trip to Athens, where they tried to buy MDMA from undercover Greek cops and fled the picturesque streets on scooters. I think he must tell this story about 4 times a year. I rub my eyes, feeling tired, check my phone, and see there's no call back, no message, nothing. Defeated, I feel a wave of hurt crash onto me. She was gonna call back, right? It couldn't end like this, could it? I watch the light glint in my side mirror, notice the way the land in front of us rolls by, almost as though it's disappearing entirely. I let this random notion distract me. Tiring, I try to stay awake, blink a few times, but I begin to doze off now, fall into a dream. There I am, alone and wandering through a vast field. Up ahead, silvery mist floats from distant hilltops, rises up around a large looming stage. There's a microphone on it, some instruments. I walk faster through this field, this mist, but the stage stretches far away. I hear rustling and quickly turn to my left, see 2 people now walking beside me. One carries a guitar case and the other a microphone stand. I look to them. I'm dreaming, aren't I say to them, but they just ignore me, remain looking ahead. Then, from somewhere else, I hear a woman's voice. Bob, is that you? She says to me. It's a voice I seem to know well, because something changes in me, something forms. I stop. The other 2 continue on, pace toward the stage without me. Bob? My name isn't Bob. My name's Nick, I try to tell her, but she's turned away from me, her face concealed, hidden. Bob, she says in a warm voice, how long have you been back? There must be some kind of mistake. I don't think I'm who you're looking for, I say, stepping forward as I try to see her face, her eyes, but she just keeps moving off, moving slightly away. I see only the back of her long dark hair. Follow me, she says, stepping off into the mist. Up ahead, I can no longer see the stage or the hilltops. They are lost to the silvery mist as it deepens through the field. I go to follow her, step forward, but then I freeze, almost falling. Wait, where did you go? I call out, my voice faint and confused. A cold and hollow feeling hits me. The mist expands. Then suddenly, I wake. We've arrived. I look out at the quaint, spacious town that is Niagara-on-the-Lake. The weather is still blistering, icy, and the first thing that grabs me is the stream of colour. Blues, reds, greens, whites. It livens the little shops and restaurants, the small houses. I see a flash flicker in the sky. The rain starts up again. Bridget and Talia are talking, laughing about something. Then they turn to me. "You're up," Talia says. "Welcome to Niagara." I can hear Vampire Weekend's I Think You're a Contra surge from the playlist. I watch as ripples of rainwater wash down the windshield. Then, from far up, I can just make out the falls, a monolithic stream of endless water. Looking up at it from down below, I realize that it makes us all seem so small, so secondary, so atomized. We turn by a sharp corner of road, and I think the car slips because I hear something bang onto the ground. "Shit," David says. "What? What is it?" Bridget asks, frantically. The car slows and we swerve to the side. "What's happened?" I ask. "Flat tire," David says, groaning. "I fucking told you to check before we went, David. Fuck," says Bridget. "We're gonna miss the Ice Wine Festival now." "Can everybody chill?" David says, but he only looks at Bridget. It's fine. I have a spare in the back." He gets out of the car and walks to the boot. I jump out too. Confused and slightly disoriented, I feel the sudden urge to go walk somewhere. "I'll be back," I tell my friends, beginning to move off. "I'm just gonna grab a snack from somewhere." "Okay, all good," David says. Bridget is still glaring at him. Talia is still in the car, reading her Joan Didion novel. I wander away from my friends, through the stream of colour, through the bustling crowds of locals and tourists, families and couples. Moving through this crowd, I start to feel an overwhelming sense of distance. I become gripped by multiple sensations of panic and peril. I look to the first cafe I can see and wander inside, my veins pulsating, my head ringing. The only one inside, I walk to the counter, nod to the woman working there. She wears old school moon-shaped glasses. Her orange-grey hair is tied back. "Welcome. What can I get you?" she says, somewhat robotically, but friendly, smiling. I see a tuna sandwich wrapped in alfoil and order it, then wander out the store, my lunch in hand, feeling the rain as it belts down, slips down my jacket, soaks my hands and face. I go to cross the road, but stop, press the button at the lights and wait. I look up again to see the faint outline of Niagara Falls, a mountain of water, nature's bridge between Ontario and New York, a portal between two different worlds. I hold onto my phone and think about calling her again. Imagine where she is in this moment, what she feels when she sees my call, when she declines it. An image returns to me, her and I standing outside of the bookshelf cinema, the night's line so long and crowded that it extends out onto the busy streets of Kingston, Ontario. Buskers are performing, bars and clubs are open and packed, and the echo of a police siren blasts across the night. She leans her head and rests it on my shoulder, the bluish-orange flash of the passing police car reflecting onto us. Then she looks up at me. "Nick," she starts to say. "What is it?" I ask, smiling, my arms wrapped around hers. "Can I ask you something?" she starts to say. But then all sound cuts out, and in my hazy memory of this moment that I had replayed over and over, something new starts to happen. One by one, the streetlights all flick off. The cars all screech to a sudden halt. The colourful billboards that overlook the street fade to black. The crowds of people, young and old, freeze, become featureless, become like statues. From there, the memory starts to darken, fade off. This memory, it disappears, and I return to the present moment. I return to this wild and rainy day in Niagara-on-the-Lake. More pines line the path as I wander back to my friends. The clouds in the sky deepen, and the wind rises, the rainfall beating down. I take the tuna sandwich out of the alfoil. Turning, I spot the car in the distance. Spot David huddled on the ground, changing the tire, winding it. In moments like these, he seems so calm. I can see Bridget filming herself, probably trying to warn her Instagram followers about the plight of the black beetle. Then I see Talia leaning against the Ranger, talking to somebody on the phone, and I see her face in full light, Streaks of soaked brown hair touch down onto her cheeks, and in that moment she looks to me, sees me walking back, watches me as I watch her. I break off, look far into the distance, and see the falls once more. Gulps of water crashing and hurling into itself. It suddenly calms me, clears all the pointless thoughts. Then my phone rings. David rises now, the spanner in his hands, the tires of the Ford Ranger fixed. Bridget rests against the back seat, and Talia turns away slowly, slow enough that for a few more seconds I can see her face, glimpse some kind of unknown feeling. She steps back inside the car, joining Bridget and David. I pull my phone out of my pocket and briefly stop, seeing her name, Roel, on the incoming call. Quickly but calmly, I decline it. A bright and tranquil feeling surges through me as I scroll through my contacts and permanently delete her number, my phone becoming drenched. Nearing my friends, I take a bite of the tuna sandwich, feel the rain stream down my face, flood through me. It feels good against my skin, and I get the notion that it's washing something away, something that no longer needs to happen. Behind me, the evergreen pines are being battered by the strong gusts, shaking and rustling. It is ungovernable wind howling across the town, almost screaming. If my intuition is right, and sometimes it is, then I think that nature is trying to tell me something. And I think that now, I might be starting to listen.
X Marks the Spot by Grace Annear.
Hardest part, palette choosing. Where to start? Bled on cross-hatch fabric. Needle lost, arising havoc. Oh little silver string, quavered body, seconds tick. Wait for cold hard, foot skin penetrating stick. I'm closing the wounds, sowing seeds, sweat beads. Repetition has its position, slows me down, progress into a meditative state. Woven through generations, a thread is sewn to gather grandmother, mother, and me together.
It is time to end. Thank you to our writers, and thank you to our listeners. This has been Bloom and Ruin. We will return